Michael Tate was never one for social events. As a committed data analyst, he found solace in numbers and statistics, much preferring the stillness of his office over the unpredictability of social gatherings. His colleagues often admired his ability to lose himself in his work, which served as both his sanctuary and his confinement. His small office was a haven of charts and data models, reflecting his intellect while providing an escape from his inner struggles. It had been years since Michael willingly attended any social event, the wounds from a failed engagement still leaving him cautious of getting involved in romantic relationships. Despite his attempts to remain aloof, his friend David's persistent invites to a party began to wear him down. David, with his charm and persuasive nature, was convinced that a night out would help Michael break out of his self-imposed solitude. The party was lively, filled with guests in their 20s and 30s, all dressed in laid-back yet fashionable outfits, engaging in activities like playing pool, watching TV, eating, drinking, dancing, and laughing, completely absorbed in the night's festivities. In a corner of the room, a tall, slim man with dark curly hair and an approachable demeanor kept glancing at a noticeably tipsy redhead, looking for an excuse to escape their conversation. "So, is this a date?" he asked, trying to mask his discomfort. "Yeah, sure," she replied casually. He continued scanning the room, clearly wanting to be elsewhere. "Listen, I need to find Michael. Can you text me later?" he asked. The redhead looked surprised. "Michael Tate? He actually showed up? I thought he had turned into a hermit." "Yeah, I convinced him to come, but now I can't seem to find him," he responded. Just then, a pretty blonde woman passed by, and the man immediately turned his attention to her. "Hey, Jenna," he called out. She smiled and glanced at his drink. "Did you bring one for me?" she asked playfully. He looked at her puzzled, then abruptly changed the subject. "Where's Michael? I went to grab a beer, and now he's gone." Jenna gestured toward another room. "He was in the game room about 15 minutes ago," she replied. David chuckled. "You'd like that, wouldn't you, Jenna? I just wanted to have a good time." He turned back to the redhead. "Text me later? Okay. I really need to find Michael." She pouted but nodded. "All right, I'll see you after." David pushed through the crowd towards the game room, where a dozen people were lounging around, watching a music video. He spotted a jolly, heavy-set man swaying to the beat. "Hey, have you seen Michael?" David asked. "Yeah, he was here a moment ago," the man responded. "Where'd he go?" David pressed. "He left suddenly, right out the front door," the man replied. David was baffled. "Why? What happened?" he inquired. "No idea. We switched to a movie, and he just got up and left," the man explained. "What movie?" David demanded. "The Graduate. It was the ending, the wedding scene," the man said. David's face reddened. "You played a movie where the bride runs off with another guy? And Michael saw that? You've got to be kidding me," he muttered angrily. Michael Tate lay on his side, gazing at his sleeping fiancée, Emily Collins. Her gentle breathing was soothing, her soft, blonde hair slightly tousled with each exhale. To most, Emily was a petite, attractive woman, not traditionally stunning, but in the morning light, her fair skin seemed to glow, making her appear almost ethereal to Michael. Michael had always been successful in life. He excelled in high school, both academically and athletically, graduated with honors, and earned dual degrees in finance and statistics before enrolling at New York's prestigious business school. He quickly secured a position at a top investment firm, steadily climbing the corporate ladder. Yet, despite all his accomplishments, a sense of emptiness lingered until he met Emily. His previous relationships had been superficial and unsatisfying, but Emily was different. Easygoing, lively, and genuine. Their relationship blossomed naturally, growing stronger over time. One warm summer evening, Michael proposed to Emily by a lake in a nearby park. She accepted with tears of joy and a radiant smile. In the 8 months since, they had been busy planning their wedding, sending out invitations, choosing dresses, and reserving a church in Emily's hometown for the ceremony, now just 6 days away. As they drove down Interstate 87, they chatted and listened to music, with Emily occasionally texting friends and family about their progress. After a while, Emily fell silent, gazing wistfully out the window at the passing scenery. Michael broke the silence. "You okay, honey? Is there something wrong with the caterer?" he asked, glancing at her with concern. Emily looked at him, slightly startled. No, nothing like that. I was just thinking about home and some unresolved issues, she replied. Michael frowned. What kind of issues? He asked, curious. Emily sighed. Some old friends and relatives have certain expectations about who I should be with. They're not exactly supportive of the wedding, she explained. Michael was confused. I thought your family liked me. We got along great when they visited, he said. Emily shook her head. My parents adore you. It's just some old friends and distant relatives who think I should be with someone else, she clarified. Michael pressed for more details. Who do they think you should be with? He asked. Emily hesitated before answering. It's about Ryan, she finally admitted. Michael glanced at her, then back at the road. But you and Ryan broke up years ago. Why is this coming up now? He questioned. Emily nodded and sighed. Some of my friends still see our past relationship as a fairy tale and keep pushing me to give Ryan another chance. They say he's changed and that we're meant to be together, she said. Michael, now driving a bit faster, was deep in thought. So, what are you saying? Do I have to compete with your ex a week before our wedding? He asked, his voice tense. Emily, frustrated, rubbed her temples. No, that's not what I'm saying, she replied, lowering her hands and looking at Michael seriously. Some of my friends, especially Lisa, might try to drive a wedge between us or treat you poorly. I just wanted you to be aware, she added. Lisa? Isn't she one of your bridesmaids? You asked someone who doesn't even support our marriage to be in the wedding. Michael asked, incredulous. Emily frowned. Lisa was my best friend, and I felt I owed her that much. I was in her wedding, so it would feel wrong not to include her, Emily explained, her tone a bit defensive. Michael turned his focus back to the road, taking a deep breath to calm himself. After a few moments, he glanced at Emily and offered a reassuring smile. Listen, Emily, I'm fully committed to us. If others want to complicate things, we'll handle it together. As long as we have each other's backs, that's what matters. I'll be on my best behavior and make sure everyone knows you made the right choice. Their opinions don't really matter. Emily smiled warmly and leaned her head on Michael's shoulder as he continued driving. When they finally pulled up to Emily's childhood home, a charming two-story farmhouse on the outskirts of a small town, it was almost dusk. They had barely parked the car when Emily's mother, a lively woman with graying hair, came rushing out to greet them with uncontained joy. Emily, my beautiful bride-to-be, she exclaimed, hugging her daughter tightly before turning to Michael. Michael, so wonderful to see you. You look as handsome as ever. She gave him a brief hug before leading them inside. Your dad's waiting, and dinner's almost ready. Emily's father, a reserved man, greeted them with a gentle hug for Emily and a firm handshake for Michael. After some small talk, they all sat down to a meal of pork chops, fresh salad, and creamy mashed potatoes. The conversation naturally turned to the upcoming wedding, with the women enthusiastically diving into details. When Emily brought up the seating arrangements, her mother's face grew concerned, and she asked, Michael, is your father coming? Michael nodded. Yes, he's flying into Albany on Thursday afternoon, so he should be here by Thursday night for the rehearsal dinner. Emily's mother's expression darkened, and her voice trembled slightly. Oh, Michael, I'm so sorry. There was a mix-up. The country club won't be open on Thursday, so we had to reschedule the rehearsal dinner for Wednesday. Michael laughed in relief. That's no problem. My dad isn't too keen on big social events anyway. He'll be just fine on Saturday. Everything will work out. His reassuring words seemed to lift the tension in the room. Are you sure, Michael? I really don't want anyone to feel left out, she asked again, her voice still tinged with worry. I'm positive, Michael replied with a confident smile. He'll be perfectly fine. Just then, Emily's mother asked curiously, but what's happening on Thursday? I don't remember any other events planned. Oh, the bachelor and bachelorette parties, Michael said, suddenly remembering. Isn't your best man, David, organizing something? Emily's mother asked. Yes, I believe so, Michael confirmed. But I asked him to keep it low-key. Most of my friends aren't arriving until Saturday, so it's just going to be a small gathering. He then turned to Emily and her mother. I guess Emily's having a bachelorette party too? Emily's mom nodded enthusiastically. Yes, Lisa's organizing it. She's really excited. Lots of Emily's old high school friends will be there. Michael smiled at Mrs. Collins' enthusiasm, but he couldn't help noticing Emily's uncomfortable expression. A sense of unease settled over him as well. At the rehearsal dinner, Michael already felt out of place. For the past 2 days, he had felt like he was on display for Emily's old friends. The main source of his discomfort was Lisa Richards, a tall, striking woman who seemed to dominate every conversation. She was heavily involved in the wedding plans and the social events leading up to it. And even worse, she had somehow roped Emily's ex-boyfriend, Ryan, into the festivities. Ryan, a charming country guy, was at the center of many stories from Emily's past, and Lisa kept bringing up these old memories, much to Michael's discomfort. One story in particular, about Ryan taking Emily to prom in a horse-drawn carriage, really got under Michael's skin. Emily blushed, Ryan looked smug, and Michael felt a wave of nausea. The women at the table cooed over the memory, leaving Michael feeling even more isolated. He tried to disengage from the conversation, glancing over at Emily's parents at another table, wishing he had chosen to sit with them instead. "I'm sorry if they got a little carried away." A voice cut through the noise. Michael barely heard it over the chatter, but he turned to see a plump woman with curly brown hair and a slightly awkward smile speaking to him. "What was that?" Michael asked, still distracted. She nodded toward Lisa. "I'm sorry Lisa took over like that. She knows everyone so well, and I'm sure she didn't mean to make you feel left out." Michael felt some of the tension ease and returned her smile. "Yeah, I understand. It's just tough when I don't know the stories, and my mind is more focused on the wedding itself," he admitted. The woman laughed softly. "Exactly. By the way, I'm Sarah Palmer. We met briefly at the mall yesterday." "Yes, I remember," Michael said, nodding. As they chatted, Michael suddenly heard his name mentioned across the table. He turned to see Lisa, looking slightly annoyed. "I'm sorry, Lisa. What did you say?" he asked. With a hint of impatience, Lisa repeated, "Can you tell everyone what you do for a living? Emily thought you'd rather explain it yourself." Michael, flustered by the sudden attention, began to stammer, I compile and analyze economic models to help my firm make investment and marketing decisions." The group stared at him blankly until Ryan quipped, "Clear as mud, huh?" eliciting a few chuckles. Michael glanced at Emily, who gave him an encouraging smile. He continued, "Basically, I evaluate market conditions to help companies decide on products, stocks, and investments." This explanation earned some nods, but the room quickly fell into an awkward silence. Feeling the need to keep the conversation going, Michael turned to Ryan. "So, Ryan, Emily mentioned you work at the Ford dealership. How do you like it?" Ryan, eyeing Michael with suspicion, answered slowly, "Yeah, it's a decent job. I like it." "So, you're in sales?" Michael asked, trying to keep the conversation going. Ryan's tone quickly turned cold. "No, I'm not a salesman. I'm one of the managers," he replied sharply. An awkward silence settled over the table, and Michael instantly regretted his question. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean anything by it," he said, trying to smooth things over. Ryan muttered, "It's fine," but the tension was palpable. Later, back in Emily's old bedroom, they recounted the evening together. "What was with Ryan's reaction when I asked about his job?" Michael asked, still puzzled. Emily thought for a moment. "Ryan has some baggage. It's not your fault he got defensive," she explained. Michael, frustrated, replied, "Are you saying it's my fault? I was just trying to make conversation. I didn't mean to upset him." Emily gently stroked his cheek. "No, it's not your fault. Ryan's always been the big shot around here, but things didn't go his way after high school. He didn't get the scholarship, the job, or, well, the girl he wanted," she said softly. Michael interrupted, a hint of sharpness in his voice. "Or the girl he wanted? Do I need to compete for you or something? It's driving me crazy." Emily raised her eyebrows in surprise. "You don't have to compete for me, Michael. I'm yours. Why would you even think that?" Michael hesitated, then finally spoke. "When Ryan showed up with that girl, it seemed like he was trying to make you jealous. And, to be honest, it looked like it worked. It's like he's never gotten over you." Emily pressed her lips together, considering his words. "Listen, Michael, Ryan and I were together for a long time, since high school and a couple of years after graduation." Michael nodded. "Yeah, you told me. We planned to get married, but it all fell apart. I didn't want to go to college or get a desk job, but I did. We started fighting, and eventually I left for school. He got jealous, started showing up unannounced, even spied on me once. It ended when he confronted me at the library. I took off the ring and told him it was over, she recounted. And that was it? Michael asked, wanted to know more. We talked a little after that, but it was never the same. I moved on, met you. And now here we are, she said, hugging Michael tightly. It's just you and me now, Michael. Ryan's just an old friend, that's all. Okay, baby, Michael replied, though later that night, as Emily drifted off to sleep, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his thoughts swirling. John Tate, a stocky man with a weathered face, sat between his son and Michael's best man, David, at the only bar in town that served food. Michael recounted the week, including Ryan's outburst at the rehearsal dinner. What a weirdo, John said loudly, reaching for his beer. He sounds like a total freak. David chuckled, taking a bite of his burger. Michael shrugged. Yeah, maybe, but Dad, you didn't miss much. Yeah, I guess so, John replied, finishing off his fries. I'd probably just end up embarrassing myself anyway, so no big loss. Michael started to object, but John raised his hand. It's okay, Mike. This, he said, gesturing to the bar around them. This is the best I can do. Michael took a sip of his beer and nodded. Yeah, Dad, this is fine. Honestly, better than last night. John looked over at his son, curious. Is this really all you wanted for your bachelor party? Just a couple of hours at a sports bar with your old man and David? No dancers or anything? Michael shook his head. No, Dad, it's okay. Even if I wanted that, this is a small town, and rumors would spread. I don't want to start my marriage on the wrong foot. Yeah, I get that, John nodded, taking a bite of his hamburger. You're right. The three men spent another hour talking, joking, drinking beer, and watching a soccer game before deciding to call it a night. In the parking lot, Michael waved goodbye to David and got behind the wheel, while his father moved to the passenger seat. Both men were lost in thought as they drove back to John's hotel in silence. After a few minutes, John fidgeted, clearing his throat and glancing at Michael several times before finally speaking, just a mile or two before they reached the hotel. Big day on Saturday, son. You ready? Michael glanced at his father briefly before turning his eyes back to the road. I'm ready, Dad. Really ready. I can't wait to get married and start a family. You'll be great, son. Much better than I ever was, John said, his voice tinged with regret. Michael quickly looked over at his father. Dad, no. It's true. Your mom and I split when you were 3, and I barely saw you after that. You had a tough time when you stayed with me after her accident, John continued, his voice breaking. Michael could see his father wiping his eyes. I'm just really happy for you, son. Happy you found someone you love. Michael pulled into the hotel parking lot and stopped the car. Dad, I'm glad you're here too. I couldn't have gotten through all this without you. John turned to his son, tears streaming down his cheeks. I'm sorry for how things were after your mom died. I could barely take care of myself, let alone you. But I love having you around, watching you work hard and succeed. You deserve to marry a great girl, and I'm so proud of you, son. Damn proud. Michael was crying now, too. They sat in silence for a few minutes, each resting a hand on the other's shoulder, until John finally said his goodbyes and headed to his motel room. Meanwhile, over at Lisa Richards' parents' house, the largest home in town, a sprawling Georgian mansion, a group of about a dozen young women lounged in the living room that evening. They giggled, shared stories, drank wine, and squealed as Emily opened her gifts. Emily, the bride-to-be, was just as excited and loud as the rest of them. Amidst the piles of lingerie, a drunken dare to model some of the pieces quickly escalated into a playful shouting match. Blushing and hesitant, Emily tried to refuse, but eventually gave in, choosing the least revealing baby doll outfit from the bunch. She took her time putting it on, her cheeks flushed with both embarrassment and excitement. Emily nervously stepped out into the hallway, still adjusting the outfit, and was met with loud cheers and applause from the other women. The energy in the room felt like something straight out of a wild bachelorette party, and though she was embarrassed, Emily struck a few playful poses for the rowdy group. Most of the women laughed and clapped, but Lisa, already tipsy, called out loudly, "Show us another one, Emily. Come on, let's see another." Predictably, the rest of the women joined in, But Emily stood her ground, shaking her head and politely refusing. There were groans of disappointment as she retreated back to the bedroom, grateful for the escape. Just as she entered, there was a knock on the front door, followed by Lisa's laughter and excited squeals. 3 men had arrived, bringing gifts of champagne and vodka. Lisa led them inside, where Bill Jenkins and Tom Anders quickly found their girlfriends to chat with. Ryan Carson, the 3rd man, asked Lisa where Emily was, saying he had something special for her. Lisa told him Emily was changing and would be out soon, so Ryan rallied the group to sing the school fight song as a surprise. Emily, hearing the noise and thinking it was another game, debated whether to join in. Deciding to let loose, she burst into the room giggling, only to be met with shocked faces. The women frantically pointed at the 3 men, who stood there just as stunned. Bill and Tom looked taken aback, while Ryan grinned and clapped. Mortified, Emily ran back to the bedroom, staying hidden for the next half hour until Lisa convinced her to come out again. By then, most of the guests had left, leaving only a few women quietly sipping their wine. Ryan was still there, lounging on the couch. He waved at Emily as she hesitantly sat down beside him, covering her face with her hands. "That was so humiliating. I can't believe that happened," Emily said, her voice filled with embarrassment. Ryan chuckled and patted her back. "If it's any consolation, I'll never forget it either. I just wish I'd had a camera." Emily glared at him, but then relaxed and laughed, shaking her head. "I should have known. Seriously, someone should have warned me." Ryan shrugged, still grinning. "Surprise is my secret weapon. Look how much fun we would have missed out on without it," he joked. They continued chatting and reminiscing until Emily decided it was time to head home. Lisa attempted to stand up to say goodbye, but Ryan insisted on driving Emily home, and she agreed. During the ride, they talked casually about old friends and shared memories. But just a few blocks from Emily's house, Ryan pulled over near a hedge. "What are we doing here?" Emily asked, her suspicion growing. "I have something for you," Ryan said, pulling out a small wooden box. Emily shook her head. "No, Ryan. I'm getting married in 2 days." "This isn't right," she protested. "Just open it, please," Ryan urged, holding out the box. Reluctantly, Emily opened the box and found an opal pendant on a delicate gold chain. Her eyes widened in surprise. "I've been looking for this for years," she exclaimed. "I drained the pond and found it in the mud 2 years ago," Ryan explained. Emily, trembling slightly, admired the necklace in the dim light. "Why did you wait until now to give it to me?" she asked, her voice soft and distant. "I was hoping we might get back together, but when you got engaged, I knew that wasn't going to happen. I just wanted to give it to you before the wedding," Ryan confessed. Emily tried to fasten the chain herself, but her hands were shaking. "Here, let me help," Ryan said gently, reaching over to assist. "Thank you," she whispered, holding the pendant close. "I love you, Ryan, I always have, but I'm getting married. I can't do this," she said, opening the car door and stumbling out, running towards her house. 12 hours later, Emily stood on a stool in her living room, wearing her wedding dress, while her mother adjusted it. The room was quiet, a stark contrast to the events of the night before. "You're quiet today. Is everything all right?" her mother asked, noticing Emily's unusual silence. Emily sighed. "Yes, Mom, I'm fine," she replied, though her voice lacked conviction. "You don't seem fine. Is everything okay with Michael?" her mother pressed, concern evident in her voice. Emily looked alarmed. "Of course, everything's fine. Why would he be upset? Did he say something?" she asked, her tone a bit panicked. "No, it's just you seem quiet. Maybe he's upset that we made him sleep elsewhere last night. He can stay here if it's a problem," Mrs. Collins suggested, trying to be helpful. Emily sighed again, absent-mindedly touching the opal pendant around her neck. "No, Mom, he's fine with it. Michael's a good guy," she said, though her words sounded more like an attempt to convince herself. Mrs. Collins' eyes narrowed as she noticed the pendant. "What's that? Did Michael give it to you?" she inquired. Emily hesitated before answering. "No, Kenny gave it to me. It's the pendant he gave me for my 16th birthday. He found it after I lost it in the pond," she explained. Mrs. Collins stepped back, crossing her arms. You're accepting gifts from an old boyfriend right before your wedding? She asked, incredulous. Emily mirrored her mother's stance, defensively. It's different, Mom. He found it and gave it back to me last night. Mrs. Collins frowned, her concern deepening. It's still a gift from an old boyfriend who clearly still has feelings for you. Be careful, Emily. You're marrying a good man tomorrow. Don't bring old flames into your marriage. Annoyed, Emily snapped. Why do you dislike Ryan so much? Everyone loves him except you. Mrs. Collins took a deep breath, softening her tone. It's not that I dislike Ryan. I like him well enough, but I worry because he doesn't seem to share your ambitions. He's charming, sure, but does he have the drive to build a stable life? I want you to be happy, and if you had wanted to marry Ryan, I would have supported you. But I'm glad you found Michael. He's a good man who will take care of you and make you happy. Emily nodded and shrugged, conflicted. I know, Mom. Michael is wonderful, and I do love him. It's just, I've always had feelings for Ryan. Being back here around him, it's bringing all that back, and it's freaking me out. It's hard to bury an old relationship. Mrs. Collins looked at Emily with understanding. I get it, sweetheart, but you need to focus. You're getting married tomorrow to a great guy who deserves your best. Remember that. Emily nodded absently, her fingers still playing with the pendant around her neck. That night, she lay in bed for over an hour, her thoughts racing. Suddenly, she heard music. At first faint, but gradually she realized it was coming from outside. She got up and looked out the window, surprised to see 5 musicians standing outside, playing a familiar tune. As the familiar tune of Can't Help Falling in Love with You floated up from the lawn, Emily initially thought it was a prank and laughed, opening the window to shoo the musicians away. But then she saw Ryan sitting on the porch roof, humming along with a wide grin. Emily froze, listening in shock, until her father's voice broke the silence. Emily, what's that noise? He called out. It's just a prank, Dad. Some guy playing music on the lawn, she replied quickly. Well, it's past midnight. I'll chase them away, her father said, starting to move toward the door. Panic surged through Emily at the thought of her father seeing Ryan. Wait, don't come in. I'll handle it, she insisted. Ryan, realizing the situation, looked around for a place to hide, but found none. He spread his arms, bewildered. Emily, quick, come here, she hissed urgently. Ryan climbed through the window, grinning. Hi, Emily. Fancy seeing you here. Despite trying to keep a stern face, Emily couldn't help but laugh. Ryan, you're going to get me into so much trouble. Ryan leaned back with a playful smile. With a face like yours, you can get out of any mess. Emily rolled her eyes. You're such a troublemaker, Ryan. Maybe, but I mean it, he said, noticing the pendant around her neck. You're wearing the opal. Emily glanced down at it. Yes, it was a lovely gesture. Thank you. Is that all we are? Friends? Because, Emily, I love you, Ryan said earnestly. Emily's eyes softened as she replied, I love you too, Ryan. The next morning, Emily woke to find Ryan snoring softly beside her. Her mother's voice came through the door. Emily, it's time to get up. Panic set in as Emily slapped Ryan awake, frantically gesturing for him to be quiet. Emily, did you hear me? Her mother called out again. Yes, Mom. I'll be right out. Emily yelled back, trying to stay calm. Let me put your dress on your bed, Mrs. Collins offered. Wait, Mom, Emily shouted, scrambling to cover herself with a nightgown. Don't come in. I've, got really bad gas. What? Don't be silly, her mother said, starting to open the door. Emily's heart raced as she desperately tried to think of another excuse. No, Mom, seriously? It's really bad. I'll come downstairs to put on the dress, she babbled, her eyes darting to Ryan, who was hastily searching for his pants. She glared at him, mouthing, Get out! Ryan nodded and, with no other option, jumped out the window in his boxers. Emily kept talking about the supposed toxic atmosphere to keep her mother at bay until she was sure Ryan was gone. Finally, she opened the door. Okay, Mom, you can come in, but I warned you. Mrs. Collins stepped inside, sniffing the air curiously. Emily, it smells fine in here, she said, puzzled. Emily smiled nervously. Really? Must be my wedding nerves. Yeah, maybe, her mother said, still concerned. Later, Emily sat in her wedding dress, staring out the window, her mind racing. Mrs. Collins entered the room, holding Ryan's jeans and wallet. "Emily, I found these under your bed. Do you want to talk?" she asked gently. Emily's composure shattered, and she burst into tears. "Oh, Mom, what am I going to do?" Her mother sat down beside her, taking her hands. "Emily, who do you want? That's all that matters. I feel so torn. Everything feels right with Michael, but I can't seem to let go of Ryan," Emily admitted, her voice trembling. Mrs. Collins wiped a tear from Emily's cheek. "No matter what, you have my support and love," she said, reassuringly. Meanwhile, in the groom's room, Michael's excitement turned to concern when he saw the distress on Emily's face. "Emily, what's wrong?" he asked, stepping forward, but she stopped him with a raised hand. "Michael, we need to talk," she said quietly as her mother led David out of the room. "Of course, sweetheart. Tell me what's wrong," Michael said, his voice filled with worry. With tears in her eyes, Emily spoke softly. "Michael, I have some bad news. I can't marry you. I love you, but I can't go through with it." Michael tried to reassure her. "If you're getting cold feet, we can wait." But Emily shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No, Michael, I can't marry you ever. It would be a mistake. I'm so sorry." Michael pleaded with her, but Emily handed him her engagement ring, sobbing. She then turned and stumbled out of the room, tripping over her dress as she fled. John Tate stood in the church foyer when chaos erupted. He saw Emily's mother, looking somber, talking earnestly with David, while nearby women eavesdropped, spreading gossip throughout the church. Soon, everyone was buzzing with speculation. David's conversation with Mrs. Collins ended on a tense note, his face red with frustration as he walked back to the groom's room. John approached him. "Hey, David, what's going on?" he asked. David shook his head in disgust. "It's off," he muttered. "What? That can't be," John replied, following David to the room. His doubts vanished when he saw Michael emerge, disheveled and tearful. "Oh my God, son, what happened?" John asked, horrified. Michael could only shake his head, unable to speak. Just then, Ryan burst into the church, half-dressed, and asked a nearby woman where Emily was. She pointed to the reception hall, and he hurried in that direction. John, furious, followed closely behind. He found Ryan kneeling before Emily, who was still in her wedding dress, smiling through her tears. Overcome with fury, John Tate shouted, "What is this? My son's heart is shattered because of this loser." His voice boomed across the room, causing the crowd to turn toward him in shock. Emily began to cry, and Ryan stood up to confront John. Before the situation could escalate, Emily's father quickly stepped in. "I'm asking you all, is it true that this—" John's words were cut short as Emily's father landed a punch squarely on his jaw, causing John to stagger back. Wiping the blood from his mouth, John's expression turned menacing as he advanced on Mr. Collins. But Michael's tired, firm voice cut through the tension. "Dad, no. It's not worth it." John looked at his son, his anger fading into a weary calm. David quickly stepped in, leading John away from the scene, but Michael paused for a moment. He glanced at Emily, his eyes full of hurt, then reached into his pocket and tossed the wedding ring toward her. The ring clinked on the tile floor and landed at her feet. "Goodbye, Emily," he said bitterly, then walked out, shoulders slumped like a condemned man. Michael sat hunched over in his small apartment, staring blankly out the window. He eventually stood, stretching his tired muscles, and walked past the empty spaces that once held memories of Emily. He muttered under his breath, "1,000 days," as he glanced at the unmade bed, evidence of another lonely night. Stripping off his workout clothes, he took a long shower, shaved, and put on his usual dark suit and tie. 1,000 damn days, he repeated as he headed out to his car. The painful memory of that walk from the church to the car, with his father and David's support, was still vivid in his mind. His dad had driven, trying to offer comfort, but Michael had been in a near catatonic state. 1,000 days, and this is still the best part of my day, he sighed as he pulled into the parking garage at Prairie Tower. Taking the elevator up to the 42nd floor, he greeted the janitors on his way to his corner office. This space had become his refuge, where numbers, graphs, and models could occupy his mind and push away the memories of betrayal and heartbreak. At the urging of his friends, Michael had gone on 5 awkward dates, but none led to anything meaningful. He wasn't ready to socialize or date, so he retreated to his office, avoiding human interaction as much as possible. Yet, deep down, he knew he couldn't continue living as a high-tech hermit forever. That night, instead of going home, he decided to attend a party David had been urging him to go to. The house was large, almost a mansion, with cars filling the driveway and lining the street. Michael parked a block away and texted David, who quickly met him at the door. David, smiling but nervous, guided Michael inside to keep him from backing out. The house was crowded with people laughing, watching a baseball game, playing volleyball, eating barbecue, and drinking beer. David introduced Michael to old friends and new acquaintances, and to his surprise, Michael found himself enjoying the evening. He even felt confident while talking to women. Michael and David played a game of pool in the recreation room, but when David left to get a beer, Michael wandered around the house and eventually ended up in the media room. There, he ran into Buddy Johnson, a former classmate. Buddy greeted him with a smile. "Hey, Michael, long time no see. Want some chips? There's barbecue outside, too." "No, I'm fine," Michael replied, nodding toward the TV. "What are you watching?" "We just watched the Cubs lose in extra innings," Buddy said, rolling his eyes. "Now it's a movie. When it's over, we're hooking up the Xbox to play. Should be done soon if you want to join." Michael nodded, standing behind the crowded couch as the movie continued. But when he recognized the graduate and realized they were watching the final scenes where Benjamin disrupts Elaine's wedding, a sense of unease washed over him. As the scene played out, with Benjamin and Elaine running away together, Michael grew pale and breathless. The group sprawled on the floor, and Couch laughed and shouted along with the movie, but Michael felt sick to his stomach. Bending over, he placed his hands in his lap, struggling to steady himself. A concerned woman nearby gently asked if he was okay. Embarrassed, Michael shook his head and left the room without a word. A week later, David nervously knocked on Michael's apartment door. After waiting a minute with no response, he knocked louder. Michael finally answered, looking tired and disheveled, dressed in shorts and an old t-shirt. "Hi, David. What do you need?" he asked, stepping aside to let him in. David hesitated, but followed him to the living room. "Hey man, sorry to barge in, but I wanted to check on you after that party last week. I'm really sorry about the movie thing," he said, trying to sound sincere. "You don't need to apologize." "It wasn't your fault," Michael replied, his tone indifferent as he sank onto the couch. "I was worried about you. I wanted to talk," David continued, his concern evident. "Talk about what?" Michael asked, his voice heavy with exhaustion. David sat on the edge of the couch, leaning forward. "You need to move forward, Mike. You've had a rough patch, but you need to live your life," he urged gently. Michael's frustration boiled over. "Easy for you to say. I was betrayed by the person I trusted most. How do you move on from that? Do you even know what that feels like?" he snapped, his anger barely contained. David raised his hands in a calming gesture. "You're right. I've never gone through something like that. But as a friend who cares, I'm telling you, you can get through this. It's going to take effort and courage." Michael snorted. "So now I'm a coward because I got dumped?" His sarcasm was biting. "No," David said, shaking his head. "I'm saying your life is up to you. You can stay isolated, or you can try to start something new." His tone was firm yet supportive. Michael, frustrated and angry, opened his mouth to argue, but then slumped back onto the couch, defeated. "I don't even know where to start," he admitted, his voice tinged with despair. David smirked slightly, pulling a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "Well, I think I might have just what you need," David said, handing the paper to Michael, who eyed it with suspicion. "It's a list of women who'd be interested in going out with you. Just give one a call," David encouraged. "I've tried this before, and it didn't go well," Michael replied, doubt etched in his voice. "Then maybe it's time to try a new approach," David suggested, his tone upbeat. "I don't know if I'm ready," Michael muttered, his confidence faltering. "That's what I figured you'd say," David said with a knowing smile, pulling out his phone and scrolling through until he found what he was looking for. "Here, your dad told me to play this for you if you resisted." He hit play, and John Tate's voice echoed through the room. "Michael, I know you've been through the ringer with that whole marriage fiasco. I get why you're feeling down on life and love, but it's time to shake off the dust and start living again. I've watched you accomplish incredible things, and now I'm asking you to do one more. Leave this behind and find some joy again. David's got a list of women he assures me are great. You don't need to dive into anything serious. Just have some fun. You've got too much life ahead to stay locked up in your own mind. Michael sat on the couch, gently rocking as he stared at the list on the coffee table. After a few moments of silence, David leaned in. So, what do you think? Michael blinked, snapping out of his thoughts. Huh. David sighed. You need to get back out there. Ask one of these women out and start living again. Michael nodded slowly. Yeah. David raised an eyebrow, surprised. Wait, did you say you're actually going to ask one of them out? Yeah, that's what I said, Michael replied, sounding more certain this time. Dad's right. You're right. I need to move forward. David grinned, nodding in approval. That's the spirit. Without overthinking it, Michael started at the top of the list. The first woman was a tall, elegant former ballerina with sleek brown hair who worked as a buyer for a fashion boutique and had a passion for tennis. They went to an Italian restaurant and caught a play afterward. The evening was polite but stilted, ending with an awkward kiss on the cheek and a hasty apology. Michael tossed and turned all night, but the next morning he decided to call the second woman. She was a bubbly, short redhead who worked at an animal clinic and loved dancing and roller skating. They grabbed sandwiches, hit a dance club, and ended up at a late-night diner for coffee. The conversation flowed smoothly, covering a wide range of topics, except their past relationships, which David had likely advised them to avoid. Over the next couple of months, they went out a few more times, but the chemistry just wasn't there, and the relationship fizzled out. The third woman was a free spirit with sun-kissed skin, lively brown eyes, and light brown hair. She worked as a research assistant at Northwestern and had a love for motorcycles, loud rock concerts, and the occasional joint. They attended a live show together, and afterward, she invited him up to her apartment. The place smelled of smoke, and Grateful Dead tracks were playing softly in the background. Michael tried to stay cool, but ended up leaving early. Back at his place, he scrubbed his clothes and showered, worried about the lingering smell. The next day, Michael called the fourth woman. She had a Marilyn Monroe vibe with her short platinum blonde hair. She worked in sales, lived with her parents, and didn't seem to have many hobbies. Michael, who was regaining his social confidence, managed to keep the conversation going during their rather dull dinner. She invited him in for a drink afterward, but he politely declined, feeling no real connection. The night ended with him alone, back in his apartment. Women 5 through 7 were fun, but nothing extraordinary. They shared good conversations and a comfortable rapport, leading to a few more dates, but Michael never felt that spark he was looking for. He began to worry that the deep connection he once had with Emily was a one-time thing, lost forever. Then he met the eighth woman, Gail and Rawson. She was 28, a University of Illinois grad with a marketing degree, and worked in advertising. She had shoulder-length ash blonde hair and a heart-shaped face. Gail's brother, who worked with David, had recommended her. Initially hesitant, she turned down Michael's first call, but after some thought, she agreed to meet up. They chose a small, cozy cafe downtown. The conversation started off a bit stiff, but soon they were laughing and sharing stories. Michael lost track of time and realized he was late getting back to the office. He paid for the meal, hailed a cab for Gail, and hurried back to work, deciding to give it a couple of days before reaching out again. But by late afternoon, he couldn't resist and called her to set up another date for the following night. They dined at an upscale steakhouse, planning to catch a movie afterward, but ended up missing it because they were so engrossed in conversation. They lingered over dessert, chatting until the waiter finally had to remind them that the restaurant was closing. Unwilling to end the night, they headed to a nearby bar and kept the conversation going. They talked about everything from their favorite vacation spots to their thoughts on sports teams, and even their ideas on life and relationships. One night, they got on the topic of celebrities, and when Michael mentioned Lindsay Lohan, Gail had a strong reaction. Ugh, Lindsay Lohan. How much of a train wreck has she become? I can't stand her, Gail blurted out, her voice thick with frustration. Michael, confused, asked, Why does she bother you so much? I mean, She's had her problems, but what makes her so different? Gail sighed deeply. It's not just about her behavior. I hate her because of this awful Disney movie she was in. I know it's irrational, but I can't help it. Michael raised an eyebrow. Wait, you seriously hate her because of a Disney movie? Gail's eyes narrowed, clearly irritated by the subject. Well, yeah, kind of. I really despise that movie, she admitted. Michael leaned in, intrigued. Okay, now you've got to explain. How bad could a Disney movie really be? Gail sighed again, leaning forward and resting her chin on her hand. You're really going to make me talk about this, aren't you? She asked, a reluctant smile tugging at her lips. Absolutely, Michael said with a grin. All right, fine. The movie is the remake of The Parent Trap. The original had Hayley Mills in it. You know the one, right? Gail began. Yeah, the one where twin girls try to get their divorced parents back together, Michael confirmed. Exactly. And to do that, they pulled some pretty nasty tricks on the woman their dad was planning to marry, Gail continued. Michael nodded, curious about where this was going. And that bothered you? Yes. Everyone loved the movie because they wanted the parents to reunite, but no one ever thought about the woman they were sabotaging. She wasn't some evil villain. She just wanted to be with the guy she loved. But those girls made her life hell just to get what they wanted, Gail explained, her frustration evident. Why does this hit so close to home for you? Michael asked, sensing there was more to the story. Gail's expression softened. You really don't know? She asked quietly. Michael shook his head. No, I don't. Gail sighed, rubbing her forehead as if trying to erase a painful memory. I thought maybe David or my brother had mentioned it, she said softly. Honestly, I have no idea what you're talking about, Michael replied, genuinely curious now. Well, I dated a guy named Trevor, right? We were pretty serious, Gail began. Yeah, I remember you mentioning him. Things were going well between you two, weren't they? Michael asked. They were at first. Trevor was older, in his late 40s, an architect, and divorced. We talked about getting married, but he had a daughter, Amy. She was 14, and she hated me from the moment we met. She was still holding out hope that her parents would get back together, and she made it her mission to make sure I didn't stick around, Gail recounted. Gail took a sip of her drink, her eyes distant. Amy turned into my personal nightmare. She played all kinds of tricks on me, just like in The Parent Trap, she added with a bitter laugh. Michael leaned in closer, intrigued. You got to tell me what she did. Gail rolled her eyes, but smiled. All right, but you asked for it. The first thing she did was mess with my perfume. I was meeting Trevor's business associates, and Amy handed me my perfume as we were leaving. I didn't know she had added something disgusting to it. Trevor leaned in to kiss my neck and nearly gagged. I was mortified. I spent the whole evening trying to clean up, but I couldn't get rid of the smell, she revealed. Michael tried to suppress a chuckle. That's brutal. Gail shook her head, smiling despite herself. And that was just the beginning. She washed my clothes in that same nasty stuff, slipped garlic into my vitamins, and even spiked my drink once. I told Trevor about it, but he just brushed it off. I started wondering if he thought I just naturally smelled awful, she said, her frustration growing. Michael leaned in, pretending to sniff the air. Well, I don't smell anything bad now, he joked. Gail rolled her eyes, but her smile remained. Oh, it gets worse. One time, she smeared fly pheromones on me before a picnic. I was swarmed by flies within minutes. I was furious and begged Trevor to talk to her, but he didn't take it seriously. That was the beginning of the end for us, she admitted. Michael's eyes widened in disbelief. You've got to be kidding. No, it's true. The final straw was when Amy spiked my wine with a sedative at a dinner party. By the end of the night, I was slurring my words and nearly passed out in my food. To top it all off, she made it look like I wet myself. Trevor was so embarrassed, and when I tried to tell him what really happened, he just got mad at me. That was it for us, Gail said, shaking her head at the memory. Wow, that's like something out of a twisted fairy tale, Michael said, still processing what he'd heard. Yeah, more like Twisted Disney, Gail quipped. That's a pretty wild story, Michael said, watching her closely. What about you? How did you end up here? Michael leaned back, taking a deep breath. My story is more like Runaway Bride, he began. Gail's curiosity was piqued. Did she back out at the last minute? No, she didn't back out. She left me for her ex. Right at the wedding. I was standing there in my tux, ready to walk down the aisle, and she just walked in, told me it was over, and left. Michael shared, his voice heavy with the memory. Gail's eyes widened. That's horrible. Yeah, it was a nightmare. My dad almost started a riot at the church. He called her every name in the book and made a scene in front of everyone. It was chaos, Michael said, shaking his head as he recalled the day. What did you do? Gail asked, her voice soft with empathy. I just left. I walked out of there like I was in a trance. I didn't know what else to do. Michael replied, the hurt still lingering in his tone. I was a mess back then. This is the first time I've actually laughed about it. It feels like it happened a lifetime ago. Michael admitted, the weight of his past slowly lifting. Time does that, Gail mused. Time helps, but sometimes it's about who you meet along the way. Michael smiled warmly at her. Honestly, it's mostly because of you, he said, sincerity in his voice. As they walked out of the bar hand in hand, Michael helped Gail into his car. Nervously, he added, I had a really great time tonight. Maybe we could spend more time together. We could go to my place. It's close by. Gail stared out the window for a moment, and Michael quickly backtracked. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. We haven't known each other that long. Gail turned to him, her expression softening. Actually, I'd like that. Let's go to your place, she said decisively. 15 minutes later, Michael opened the door to his apartment, feeling a bit self-conscious. Well, here it is, he said, wishing he'd thought of something more clever to say. Gail stepped inside, taking into space as Michael took her coat. Make yourself comfortable. The kitchen's over there, and the bathroom is down the hall, Michael offered, trying to keep things casual. Gail looked around the apartment, then back at Michael with a focused expression. Michael, she said softly, why don't we skip the tour and just go to the bedroom? Michael swallowed hard and nodded. Later that night, he woke up and realized he wasn't alone. He turned to see Gail's smiling face in the dim light. Hey, she whispered softly. Hey yourself? Can't sleep? Michael asked. No, I woke up a while ago. I've just been thinking, Gail replied. About what? Michael inquired, curious. Gail teased. I'm not sure I should say. A girl shouldn't always reveal her plans. Plans? What plans? Michael asked, his interest piqued. Gail's eyes sparkled mischievously. I'm going to make you mine, Michael, she declared, her tone playful yet serious. Michael froze for a moment, taken by surprise. You've made a pretty good start, he finally said quietly, locking eyes with her. Their relationship quickly deepened, blossoming into something vibrant and full of new experiences. Within a few months, they were engaged and busy planning what seemed like the perfect wedding. Everything was going smoothly. No hiccups, no lingering doubts. Michael's worries seemed to fade away, and for a while, life felt almost too good to be true. But then, out of nowhere, Gail casually mentioned that Trevor wanted to attend the wedding, and even some of the pre-wedding events. She insisted it was just a polite gesture, but the news unsettled Michael. He tried to stay calm, telling himself that Gail was just being courteous. However, when Trevor arrived, it quickly became clear that his intentions weren't so innocent. He frequently pulled Gail aside for private conversations, touched her too familiarly, and acted like they were still a couple. Gail never firmly told him to back off, which only fueled Michael's growing unease. Less than 10 months after meeting Gail, Michael found himself at another rehearsal dinner, but this time with a gnawing sense of dread. Trevor, charming and confident, effortlessly captivated the guests, especially Gail, who seemed unable to take her eyes off him. Michael sat there, growing increasingly anxious, barely touching his food and struggling to keep up with the conversation. Finally, he muttered to himself, rubbing his temples in frustration. Gail noticed and leaned in. Are you okay? You look upset. Michael glared at her and whispered angrily, Damn it, Gail. If you're going to destroy me, why don't you just use a knife? Gail's eyes widened in shock. What? What are you talking about? Michael smirked bitterly. Come on, Gail. I've been down this road before. You invited your ex to our rehearsal without even asking me. You've been having secret conversations with him, and you can't stop looking at him. I know how this ends. Maybe we should switch places. I'll be the one left at the altar this time. Gail shook her head vigorously, leaning closer. No, Michael, it's not like that. I didn't invite him. He invited himself. He said he wanted to see me, and I didn't tell you because I knew you'd be upset. Upset about what? A last-minute tryst with your ex? Why wouldn't I be upset about that? Michael demanded, his voice low but seething with anger. Michael, no. Just stop. Gail replied firmly, her voice becoming more resolute as the panic faded from her eyes. This isn't what you think it is. Michael raised his eyebrows, waiting for her to explain. Gail took a deep breath before continuing. Look, if you just wait a minute, just a couple of minutes, you'll see. At that moment, one of the women Trevor had been charmingly chatting with suddenly exclaimed, What's that on your teeth? Is it some kind of juice? Gail turned to Michael with a knowing smile. Or maybe you won't have to wait at all. Michael turned around, his annoyance turning to confusion as he saw Trevor still smiling, but now with dark blue teeth and lips and a drip mark on his chin. Trevor's hand flew to his mouth, his expression shifting from confidence to confusion and then to alarm. What the hell is that? Michael exclaimed, his eyes wide. What did you do? We're not done yet, Gail replied nonchalantly, turning back to watch the scene unfold. Michael watched as Trevor, now frantic, tried to clean himself with a napkin dipped in water, only to spread the blue dye further. His expression shifted from irritation to outright panic as he realized something was terribly wrong. In his attempts to clean up, Trevor realized he was stuck to his chair. He began sawing at his pants with a knife, desperate to free himself, while the guests' polite chuckles turned into full-blown laughter. Finally, with a loud, ripping sound, Trevor managed to stand, but not before turning himself into a spectacle, a corporate clown with torn pants and a blue-streaked face. Oh my God, that's cruel and incredibly hilarious, Michael said, turning to Gail, who was watching with smug amusement. Yes, it was, she replied with a satisfied smirk. Especially the last part. I wasn't expecting that. Michael leaned in, whispering conspiratorially. What do you mean you didn't expect? Wait, you didn't plan this all on your own? Michael asked, his voice filled with surprise. It wasn't just me, Gail replied with a sly grin. I had a partner in crime. A partner? Michael raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Yes, someone with just the right mix of mischief and creativity, Gail said, nodding toward the end of the table. Michael followed her gaze and saw his father, John, grinning widely and raising his wine glass in a toast. Oh my God, Michael laughed, shaking his head. What have I gotten myself into? I don't know, Gail replied, wrapping her arm around his, but I think it might be something pretty special. Heaven, maybe? Michael suggested, feeling a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. Heaven sounds about right, Gail agreed, leaning into him as they both chuckled. Meanwhile, across town, Emily parked her old, beat-up car under a shady tree, wiping sweat from her forehead and cursing the broken air conditioner. She stepped out and walked up the driveway of the small, run-down duplex, passing a tiny patch of brown, dried-up grass and a broken sprinkler. She unlocked the screen door and stepped into the cluttered living room, where a fan was lazily blowing warm air over her sleeping husband. She slammed the door shut, jolting Ryan awake. Hey, babe, Ryan mumbled, rubbing his messy hair. What time is it? Emily surveyed the mess. An empty pizza box, a half-eaten bowl of cereal, a video game console tangled in cables, dirty socks scattered on the floor, and the TV droning on with a video game intro screen. Country music played faintly on the radio. It's 4:30, Ryan, she replied, leaning over the fan. Did you interview for any jobs today? Ryan sat up, stretching lazily. How was I supposed to go to interviews when you had the car all day? Emily crossed her arms, raising an eyebrow. You could have looked online, filled out applications, made some calls. It's been 6 months, Ryan, and we're out of money. Have you done anything at all? Ryan sighed, rolling his eyes. Yeah, I checked online, but there's nothing out there except crap jobs. Maybe working a crappy job for a while won't kill you, Emily suggested, her patience wearing thin. Maybe not being a nagging which won't kill you either, Ryan shot back, his tone sharp. Emily's face darkened as she covered her mouth, blinking back tears. Realizing he'd gone too far, Ryan's expression softened. He stood up, pulling her into a hug. I'm sorry, Emily. I didn't mean that. I just don't want to settle for something that doesn't pay enough, he whispered, looking into her eyes. Just stick with me, okay? There's a new dealership opening on the west side, and I'm hoping to get a spot there. We'll be fine. Just give me a little more time. Emily sighed, nodding reluctantly. Okay, Ryan, but I'm stressed. My accounting job barely covers our bills, and we've got no savings left. We really need a second income. I know, Em. I'll get something soon, I promise. Don't worry, Ryan assured her with a half-hearted smile. They exchanged a weary glance before walking over to a small alcove with a desk and an old computer. Emily sat down, turned on the computer, and began paying the bills. After a few minutes, she glanced at the browsing history and saw only one job search amidst a slew of sports pages and YouTube videos. She looked over at Ryan, who was now casually pulling a slice of cold pizza from the coffee table. Want some? He offered, his mouth half full. She shook her head. No, I'm going out with the girls tonight, remember? Oh yeah, he nodded, chewing slowly. Don't spend too much money. I won't, Emily assured him with a forced smile. He grinned back, oblivious, before returning to his pizza. She watched him for a moment, seeing not a grown man, but a boy trapped in a man's body. Sighing, she reached for a wooden box on the shelf, pulling out an opal pendant. Her expression softened as she gazed at it, but her smile faded when she heard Ryan swearing at his video game. Emily bit her lip, her thoughts drifting to what could have been. She opened the box further, lifting a felt-covered panel to reveal a beautiful gold ring with a diamond. She admired it for a moment, lost in a mix of regret and longing, before returning to the computer. On the screen, she pulled up a folder she had hidden years ago. Photos of her past life. Photos of Michael. There he was, smiling with colleagues on his honeymoon in Hawaii and standing with his picture-perfect family in front of their stunning home. The phone rang, snapping Emily out of her thoughts. She answered and heard Sarah Palmer's cheerful voice on the other end. Hi, birthday girl. Ready for the bachelorette party? Emily hesitated, still lost in her memories. Yes, Sarah, I don't know. Our budget is really tight and... No excuses. It's your birthday present from all of us. You're not paying a dime, Sarah insisted. The whole gang will be there, except Lisa. Why can't Lisa come? Emily asked, curious. She had to pick up a second job because Tim's back in rehab. She couldn't make it, Sarah explained. Oh, I had no idea, Emily said softly, feeling a pang of guilt. Yeah, it sucks, but tonight we're going to have a blast. Don't be late or we'll miss the start of the show, Sarah warned, her tone brightening. The show? Emily asked, a bit confused. Yeah, we're seeing a romantic comedy with Jennifer Lawrence. It starts at 7 o'clock, so we need time to eat first, Sarah replied enthusiastically. Emily hesitated, biting her lip. Is that the only option? There's a Tarantino Western, but that's about it, Sarah mentioned, clearly not thrilled by the idea. Emily snorted softly. You know, maybe I should go with the Western. Sarah chuckled. Really? I didn't know you were into Westerns. Emily glanced over at Ryan, engrossed in his video game amidst the mess of their living room, then back at the image of Michael and his perfect family on the computer screen. Her voice was heavy with melancholy and a touch of regret as she replied, It's not that I'm into Westerns, Sarah. It's just that I really, really hate romantic comedies.